An interesting sidelight is the apparent unawareness of many of the medical student body of the importance as well as the extent of legal implication involved in the day-to-day practice of medicine. I
think that people saw that, those who attended the workshop number 3, the number of acts and laws behind the needs and the situation. And I believe that the simple fact of having a training course when you can have both a lawyer or a doctor to understand the reality of each other is necessary. And then, in your practice, you can learn to know each other better, but I think it's fundamental that universities are also part of this cooperation right from the outset, to learn to work together.
Even though I agree that medical students who enter med school may have their perspectives change as they go through, I believe that who we are as individuals we bring to our professions. And I think that individuals and people who have greater empathy or a greater understanding of social justice issues will probably gravitate, talking about medicine, to social pediatrics. And even if they don't do social pediatrics, will practice the philosophy of social pediatrics. The second point that I want to make, which I think is even more important, is who we train as medical people. I think that medicine has become really elitist, and I think most students that enter medical school are quite privileged. You have to have money, you have to know people, and I think that we really are, we have to look at the criteria for entry into medical school, and I think university as a whole.
One of the things that comes to my mind when we're working from the ground up is the assessment of what are the needs and challenges, and it's a very, such programs evolve. They evolve partially because of the challenges the children face, so what do we need for them and for the families, but also they evolve because of the kinds of expertise each person or group of people brings. So I'm wondering, since there's a lot of complementarity in the disciplines. So I'm wondering, we haven't talked here about the role perhaps of nurse practitioners as having a role in one point, as a point of entry perhaps, or as a way of integrating some of the ideas at the family level. That's what's worked well for us, because they can bridge between different clinicians, but also have some autonomy to take the work forward. So I'm just wondering if anyone else has had that experience or considered, if that opportunity, I guess, is also available.
On a souvent parlé de tout ça avec les gens de Colombie.
We have spoken with people from BC because they use nurse practitioner indeed with great interest. And when we started, well, the person that joined us was a nurse. And she was not a nurse practitioner, but she was a nurse that has a great deal of experience. When we started with AED, that is the support program for children. And she was visiting me also when I was doing home visits, and this was really important. And for several years, that's the way it started, when I started working in this program for helping children in difficult situations. And I don't know why. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the social workers are taking too much place, or I don't know why we didn't have more nurses. Oh, Julie, I thought you were not here in the room, sorry. But, you know, it remains something very interesting, and we also have Maude in Lévis, who is a research nurse, and she has developed the center. She actually leads and is the clinical coordinator of the center. So I think with a doctor, with a practitioner, it's important to have someone from the health sector. It's an interesting model as such. But in Quebec, we do not have the nurse practitioner, and so we are more limited in this way. And we have some nurses from the health center that are on and off in a way. because they do not really understand. They are connected to also vaccination and sexual teaching, and we are even taking these nurses outside of our schools to do vaccination. So in Quebec we have limited the nursing model that is much wider elsewhere, and that's a pity. But indeed we would appreciate to have more nurses that would be trained for global health and to also contribute to social pediatrics. Maybe it's just circumstances and some historical development, but it really started at the beginning with a nurse. When we started the movement, it was perfect. And it is an important point, the participation of nurses in this process. And I think we can learn from your experience in BC. And I've also met the nurse practitioners there, and they are very well trained and very well educated to work at community level. So that's something that we'd like to develop. Well, if I'm trying, I'm not a researcher, but if I'm trying to think as a researcher, I could see some benefits for such an approach in social pediatrics. With Aero Quebec, we're interested in that, and they come back with their data. And then, what kind of meaning do they give to the data that they gather? And without any political will, how can the academic world integrate social pediatrics in the various academic curricula and in the training programs of various professionals? So, well, we can see the benefits of this, we can see the pluses, advantages, we'd like to integrate it, but how? That's my question. How can pediatrics be, included in those three different areas? What kind of position or approach could the social pediatrics adopt to be, integrated in those various sectors, which is called triangulation? So that's a simple question, to be honest. The first step, well, we proceeded step by step. We never refused any researchers. There are several researchers who came to carry out some research project. We have also the group right now that is carrying out a wider approach, which is the Group for Research and Action on Child Victimization. But the first step for me was to define clearly what we are doing, because again, social pediatrics definition has been stabilizing already for a year or so, so it's a progress as such. The other big question, since it is an approach that mobilizes the community, well, we have to make sure that the community follows suit and that they are interested. Well, the community really agreed with that, but before we had really enough popular support and adherence, well, it's required some time. And over the last 3 years, we've seen a stabilization of the community support, and this is going to be, of course, a leverage for political lobbying to act politically. And if we were not well known within the population, I don't think the minister would have come to spend half a day with us. And I don't think she would have left also her political staffer behind for the whole symposium either. So it is moving forward step by step, incrementally. And with a movement that is being set up right now and getting also more structure, we are becoming a critical mass that will help to set up this triangulation. And as far as I'm concerned, we have had some limited success in the universities, but we are getting a better credibility. We are broadening our credibility to think about a chair in the university in the field of social pediatrics. It means that we have reached a certain level of credibility. So we are triangulating right now. We still have a lot of way to go, but it is taking place step by step.
Juste pour compléter un petit
Just
peu
in a way to
ce que
complete what
Dr.
was
Julien disait, je pense
said
que
by Dr.
c'est pas
Julien,
l'intérêt qui
I don't
manque
think it is a
effectivement,
lack
puis,
of
ça revient un
interest.
petit peu que je pense qu'il
Indeed,
faut partir à
there
la
is enough
base, les
interest, and you
résidents,
have to start,
à chaque
at
fois
the
qu'on parle de
grassroots
pédiatrie
level.
sociale, les gens sont
Every time we
vraiment,
speak about social
intéressés dans la
pediatrics,
population, tout ça. Et je
residents or
pense
people
qu'il
in the
faut vraiment
population are
travailler en
interested,
collaboration,
and we have to work,
puis
of course,
transcender un petit peu
in
l'esprit
cooperation
bureau, puis l'administration, parce que
and
sinon, ça
transcend a
fonctionnera
little bit
jamais. Et ça, je
administration,
pense
otherwise
que
it will
c'est
never
quelque chose
work.
d'important. Puis
But
un
it's
autre
something
point aussi, là,
important.
tout à l'heure,
But
on
the other point
mentionnait
is we were
que
mentioning
l'exposition devrait
earlier
être avant. Je suis
that
parfaitement d'accord. Là, puis
exposure
je donnais
should be
mon-
taking
mes
place
exemples personnels, mais effectivement,
upstream,
j'avais
and
fait en
I
tant
agree with
qu'étudiante en
that.
médecine,
I
puis je pense
had
qu'effectivement,
this.
faut qu'on aille au niveau
We have
de
to
la formation,
have
là,
exposure,
quand on commence
at a level of
nos études de
when we
médecine.
start
Sur
to
les
study
bancs d'école,
medicine
j'ai entendu
right
qu'il y a des
on
groupes
the
d'intérêt
school
en pédiatrie
benches, and I know there are
sociale
some interest group in social
commencent
pediatrics
à
that start
s'établir dans
to
les
be
universités.
established
Donc,
in
je pense que ça va
universities
tout
as
être des
well.
choses qui
So
vont
I
faire
think
en sorte
those are
que
different
le
elements
mouvement
that
va
are going
continuer
to
à
help
progresser.
to
Puis
grow
je sais
the
que des
movement.
fois, il y a,
And I
il y a
know
des désaccords,
that
il y a des
sometimes
façons
there are
différentes de
disagreements,
fonctionner entre les
different
institutions,
ways
puis un
of
petit peu ce qu'on voit
functioning
dans
and
la communauté,
operating
dans le
between
centre de
institutions,
pédiatrie
and what
sociale,
we
mais je pense
see
que si on
also in
travaille
communities and
en bas ensemble, puis qu'on fait des
social
collaborations,
pediatric
on peut
center. But
arriver
if we
très
manage
loin
to
de-
work together
avec
to
ça.
have common projects, I think we can reach great
En
goals.
fait, la
Ms.
recherche
Prudhomme.
s'est intéressée
Well,
à pédiatrie
it's
sociale, la façon
interesting
qu'on
because
travaille
research
depuis
was
plusieurs années.
interesting in social pediatrics for
Jusqu'à ce
several
jour,
years
en tout cas,
already,
il y a
and
personne qui a
until
compris
now,
ce
no
qu'on
one has
faisait.
really understood what we are doing,
Puis,
even though they
en
seem to be
fait, ils ont
interested in
compris
getting to
ou ils
know.
n'ont pas été
Well,
capables de
maybe they
transcrire.
understood, but they were not
Et,
able to really
c'est assez
transcribe
difficile, c'est un
what we
défi
were
en soi
doing. So it's a
d'essayer
challenge as such
d'évaluer ce
to
qu'on fait.
try to
Parce
assess
que
what
on
we're
fait,
doing.
En pédiatrie
In social
sociale, tout
pediatrics,
ce qu'un
what we
enfant
do
a
is
besoin
trying to
dans un
do everything that a
environnement
child
global, et
will
on
need
s'attaque à tous
in a
les
global
facteurs de
environment,
stress.
and we
Alors, comment
tackle
évaluer?
all
On peut
stress
évaluer Head
factors. So
Start,
how
c'est
can we
facile. On peut évaluer
assess? Well, we can
un
do it
projet
Head
de
Start.
simulation,
You can have a
évaluer un
simulation
projet de
project.
négligence. On
You
peut
can have a
tenter
project
d'évaluer
on
le cercle.
neglect. You can
Anne-Marie
try
Pichet,
also to
a
assess
tenté
the
d'évaluer
circle.
de façon
Anne-Marie Pichet
descriptive.
tried
C'est pas
to
simple.
do this in a
Se reprendre une
descriptive
deuxième
way,
fois pour faire
and
le
it's not
suivi.
easy, and you have to
Évaluer
tackle this a
l'ensemble
second
des
time for the
services
follow-up,
qu'on offre,
trying to
la
assess
pratique
all
en
the
fait,
services
qu'est-ce
and
que
the
c'est le
practice,
toucher proche d'un
what
enfant, tout
is,
ça.
you know,
Et
being
en plus de ça, il y a
close
pas juste ça.
to a
C'est
child.
assez complexe parce que là, il y
And
a
it's very
l'intérêt
complex
des
because there
avocats.
is
Il y a des
also
avocats de
the
plus en plus sont
interest
intéressés à
from
cette
lawyers,
pratique.
and lawyers
Et
are
puis,
more and
qui
more
vont
interested in this
venir,
practice.
colorer, je
And they
pense,
will
la
give
pratique de
another
la pédiatrie
shade,
sociale de plus en
another
plus.
color
C'est mon souhait.
in social
Je pense pas que ça
pediatrics.
appartient. Moi, je suis
You know,
avocate,
I am a lawyer,
médiatrice, et je
and
suis,
I'm a
je me
mediator,
dis praticienne en
and I'm
pédiatrie
also
sociale.
what I
Le
call a
terme
social
pédiatrie sociale, en
pediatrics
fait, a été
practitioner.
discuté en
So
Europe,
in Europe, you know, social
ESSOP,
pediatrics has
puis,
been discussed within
bon, est-ce qu'on
ESSOP,
appelle ça
and
pédiatrie sociale?
I don't know whether
Est-ce
we
que
call
c'est
it
pas
social
un petit peu,
pediatrics
ça
or
porte à confusion, etc.
sometimes there is some confusion about
Un autre point, en tout cas, que
what we
je
call
voulais-
it.
je voulais
But this was another
mentionner,
point
c'est
I
que
wanted to
il y a
mention as well.
l'intérêt,
Was
là, pour
there
les
is
universités
there is
d'intégrer,
interest from
des
universities to
savoirs,
integrate
qui
knowledge
viennent de pratiques
that
comme
come
la
from
pédiatrie
practices
sociale,
such
McGill,
as,
pour nommer McGill, mais
you know,
aussi
social
l'Université Laval
pediatrics,
et
and you have
d'autres.
McGill University or
en
Laval
fait, on
University,
cherchait
just to
de
mention a
l'argent,
few of
c'est de
them.
l'argent qu'il fallait
And so
pour
they
développer
needed
le
some
projet
financial
pilote,
funds to, you know,
curriculum
to
conjoint
design
entre
the
les trois
pilot project
facultés,
that would be a joint curricula between the three
médecine,
faculties, that is
droit
the medical
et
school, the
sciences
law
sociales,
school,
pour
and social
débuter.
science
C'était
schools.
le vouloir, le bon
So
vouloir
it
était
was
là,
really the
l'intérêt était là,
will power that was
mais il
there
manquait de
to begin
l'argent
with,
pour le
but
faire et on aurait
they
pu
were
le
lacking
débuter,
funds
en septembre
to.
dernier.
We could have started the program
Donc,
last
à McGill.
September
Donc,
in
c'est
McGill.
vraiment l'argent qui,
So here we now,
qui
we're
est
at the stage where money
un obstacle,
is
la
an
compréhension
obstacle,
aussi, mais ça, on
and
peut,
the
avec
understanding of what
la
we're doing as
chaire,
well. But through the
améliorer
chair,
les
we can
connaissances et les
definitely
intégrer en-
improve the knowledge
dans
and
l'université.
integrate them at the university level.
Moi, je suis Dr Michel Vartien. En fait, je voudrais apporter 2 points à discuter, questions.
So I would like
l'opinion
to
de
maybe
nos
discuss
experts
some
ici,
point and
en
have
avant.
the viewpoint of
Le
our
premier, c'est au
experts
sujet
here.
des
The first
infirmières.
one
Je
dealing
crois
with
que
nurses.
si on parle
If we're speaking about being interdisciplinary,
le corps professionnel avec lequel on travaille le plus et depuis le plus
this
longtemps.
is probably the
Les
health
infirmières en
professionals
place,
with whom we're working most, and we have been working with them for a long time. And we also have some more cooperation with clinical nurses here in Quebec, and their role is very interesting. And as my third hat, that is, I'm a physician who works almost all by myself, but I start working a lot with clinical nurses, and they really have a great role to play. So I don't know whether through family medicine groups or centers we could also extend that. But nurses can really help us, not just with vaccination, but also with advice and for breastfeeding, with very early childhood needs. So huge questions that for parents who are not well equipped do not have the time sometimes to ask questions, and sometimes they're even embarrassed to ask some questions. So I think the nurse has a huge role to play. I think that's where we really have to involve nurses. And in Quebec here, this has appeared very clearly, and we are doing this in hospitals and as well as outside. Second point, I'm very happy to see the number of residents here. I'm starting being an old clinician myself, but I was well exposed to differently during my faculty years. Well, we had some courses also on the life cycles or sociology, but as far as I remember, we even had a class on the relationship, in a couple or partners relationship course. So sometimes we were very youth, we wanted to do biology, medicine, sciences, and we saw those classes that were given by university teachers or professors who were a little bit traditional, and we didn't have much contact with the grassroots, with the reality, with the floor, and so we lost interest. We were just we lost interest, and we were concentrating on physiology and anatomy courses. And we did not understand the usefulness. We did not see the connection with practice. And this is once we were thrown into the real world where we realized, oh gosh, I could have learned a lot more about this. So really, the cooperation between the reality of practice and everyday life in the field of pediatrics, and at the same time university experiences, it's the same thing. I mean, children at school will learn math and French, but if they don't know how to use it outside of the school, well, it's going to come in one ear and go out through the other ear. So this is where it's important. I see my president here who nods. Well, that's one point. And secondly, you will have always people who would be more interested in such approaches, and other doctors that would just be laboratory doctors, and that's what they will be interesting for them. And it's not an homogeneous student population. You have future psychiatrists, surgeons, future lab doctors, and a diversity of medical position and orientation. So there always be also a category interested in social pediatrics.
I will be the devil's advocate, if I may, because we really believe that we, in the bottom-up approach, to really engage the community. But I think the social pediatrics concept is very much based on that bottom-up approach. So if we take that into account, and we take into account the fact that people have some special skills and are more interested in the social aspect of their work as a physician. But it seems to me to hurry as if it was as if it were scientific, when in fact what we want our teachers to tell the student is, did you listen to the nurse? Did you really listen to this other therapist or the social worker? Did you listen? For example, when we resuscitate a neonate, there is a debriefing session after, and at the debriefing we invite everybody, even the people who are cleaning the place, to ask them if it looked like an ER program or if it was something else, something better. So we have to educate our clinicians, of course, to favor integration between disciplines, but I think that this would have more of an impact on a physician compared. I don't know if you understood what I was saying. I'm saying, but well, I would react to your observation or comment. A bit provocative. Yes, that's what we've been doing for the whole day, but that's very constructive also. It's good. Answer I have to that, to format a project or an approach that is a win-win approach and that there's a strong popular buy-in. We want that so that it will not be diluted. Why? Well, if it is diluted, it will disappear more quickly. So we want the approach to focus on what it brings, what is different for children. But what is more robust are the principles and the tools. So the practice in itself has to evolve. Of course, if the framework is too rigid, it will not evolve, and it will maybe lose relevancy. At first, for example, we were treating only infectious diseases, and we lost maybe the boat. In the field of medicine, we forgot about social morbidities, but in social pediatrics, we noticed that there were very new, strange morbidities, so we really joined the movement and tried to intervene on the social dimension and not only on the health dimension. And you're here to improve this approach. Somebody called me and said we should do social perinatality. I said, yes, of course, why not? Great idea, because we wanted to also to help the pregnant woman and intervene with neonates, so it can't be too rigid. Also, we want to be independent. We're an intermediary. We cannot really be within the system. We want to be near the community, and to preserve that, we have to get funding, and we have to know what we're funding. The ministry that funded the foundation imposed a condition. We are going to assess what you're doing, and if we're satisfied, we'll fund other centers who do social pediatrics. So if they don't do that, they will get no government funding. But we want to have long-term funding, but up to 30% of our budget, not 100%, because we will not be able to be independent. But there's a price to that. The price is to standardize our approach, to have clearer goals, because I'm tired of being asked what I do. What is medical social pediatric? Yes, I have two comments.
I'm so glad you asked your question, because I'm awake now, and I suspect a lot of the other folks in the room are. So and I know you're being a devil's advocate, and good for you. You know, my answer would be twofold. Community pediatrics, social pediatrics, is addressing the most important causes of death and disability for kids. If neonatology were the answer, the Canadian infant mortality rate wouldn't be 43rd in the world. And the US infant mortality rate wouldn't be 51st in the world. I mean, that stinks. Kids are really suffering, and it's not being answered by the traditional medical model. My second thing would be the other reason why we need a chair in community or social pediatrics is because it's harder than anatomy. It's more difficult than anatomy. It's more difficult than neonatology. It's the emerging discipline for dealing with the most complicated problems for children and families. And we've got to start to take it seriously. So I know you're shaking your head and you were a good devil's advocate, but I felt really obligated to say, This is about addressing the most pressing problems facing kids, death. And this is harder, in my mind, than those other things.
I would say that the role of a practitioner in social pediatrics is to look at toxic stress as a whole, to assess the sources and act at the source level. There's the APCA method, sharing, understanding, acting. So to approach the problem, it's to identify the problem, and then many groups can share the information, but to bring all the information together, you need to have the tools, the knowledge, and you can get that knowledge maybe at university, and then you develop your skills in the field. And then to implement, one of the roles of a social pediatrician is to be an advocate, to do advocacy, and that's not something you learn on the job. You have to learn the tools, even learn how to communicate with the media, with government, state your case. You can't learn that on the job.
We have talked a lot about the necessity of looking at other aspects of causes for health and ill health for children. We have talked about medicine is very important, but that's only part of it. And maybe even a smaller part, that you just said about the infant mortality. Medicine plays a very small role in that. There are other issues. So my main question is that perhaps it's time to leave the medical connection with what you're doing. Pediatrics is still a medical specialty, but what we really want to do is to promote the health of children. So we're not talking about children's health, child health instead. I mean, we noticed in ESOP that if you insist on having pediatrics, we talk about social pediatricians and things. People who are not in the medical field, like social workers, psychologists, and other things, they said, well, that's another medical issue. That's not for us. But it is for them, as a matter of fact. And instead of just frightening them and taking them away, why not change the name and say, we bring in everybody has to do with child health?
I'm a social worker at Côte des Neiges, at the CSP, and what I've been noticing is we talk about medical residents, we're talking about social pediatrics, but also you have social workers, and I'm part of that. And with Ms. Mongeau, how to integrate social work in social pediatrics. I left school not so long ago, and we never heard about social pediatrics. We don't have medicine courses, so of course it was a challenge for me to work with a physician every day and to be faced with all these medical conditions, be it asthma and others, and I was a bit lost in all that, and I had to do my own I had to learn myself. So we say that we want to convince residents to join the movement, but you also have psychologists, social workers, art therapists, and others. All the team that surrounds a doctor, no, not behind the doctor, they work with the physician. Yes, I'm a bit stressed, maybe. So it wasn't really a question, it was more a comment I had to make, and also wanted to say, quite simply, that other disciplines have to be taken into account. Yes, that's really important. It's true. We
We
talk from experience, that's what we know, but in such a model, everybody is on the same level, an equal footing. You also have even the police, you have teachers and others, so you have many stakeholders, and they're all important. Dr. Stanmet, a few moments ago, I was thinking there was people felt a bit depressed that change wasn't coming quickly. Maybe that's a good thing, because then you avoid making mistakes. And things evolve constantly. If you remember, in 1928, the Nobel Prize was given to somebody because he had discovered that you could treat syphilis by giving somebody malaria. And they thought it was a scientific breakthrough. And today, we would be sent to prison if we did that. The change brought by Gilles and then Hélène, their team, change came about very quickly, even though Gilles remembered that he started as a physician on his bike all alone, but now we have this room full of people. So now we're talking about not only changing communities, but society as a whole, and also the meaning of social solidarity. And it involves all of that for the wellness not only of children, but of the population as a whole. I quoted a sentence yesterday, a Chinese sage. I would like to quote now Bob Dylan for maybe the younger generation, or maybe not. But I don't know it by heart. Do you know it by heart? It's in English, of course.
Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand. The times, they are changing.
You hear me? I'm Julie. I'm a med student. I talked with Dr. Julien this morning, saying that I was coming here. I was asked, what's the difference between a pediatrician and a social worker? Because I said, well, yes, we also work with family. And this the concept of medicine is based on competition among candidates. We have teachers, and we sit in a classroom and we learn. But we all have different motivation when we choose med school. Maybe I have a lot of hope insofar as a chair is concerned and McGill or formal courses. But as students, we have to demand what we want and to maybe organize something. There's a great project in University of Montreal. Med students, unfortunately, again, for my social workers colleagues, it's an internship in vulnerable population settings, in prisons, in First Nations communities, urban communities, because we're not taught anything on this.
Je suis aussi directrice du Centre de pédiatrie sociale à Verdun. Je crois sincèrement que, comme ergothérapeute, dans un milieu scolaire,
as an occupational therapist, maybe all children do not have a doctor, but they all have a teacher, and maybe teachers are not well aware of the different stages of development of the child and what tools may be used. So there's not only specialized ed, but there are other resources in the school system. You have something that is done insofar as curricula, so maybe teachers could also get training. They would have tools to better deal with children who have behavioral problems, and also it takes a lot of energy to sensitize teachers, and teachers are not all open to this. So to include that in their curricula would be a good idea too. I would like to remind ourselves that right at the start, I'm still talking about history, but it's important. The first partnership we had was with schools. That was at the very beginning. We were still traveling, so we were offered a room by the school, even a pager, because they wanted to be able to communicate with us. So the first services we provided was to meet with the teachers to explain ADHD. It was very prevalent. Teachers did not understand. They would simply say that they had to be given Ritalin. So we started meeting the teachers, and we created a partnership that's still very powerful. We always work in very close cooperation with elementary schools. We have different programs, for example, programs for children who enter school and so on and so forth. So the major program, it's not simple because it's not easy to negotiate with the school board, because the school board is this big institution on Sherbrooke Street. It's too big, it's not accessible. You almost have to go with a tie before you get in. So it's highly controlled and very far from the people. So we have to negotiate this at the level of each school, of each principal. So still, it's very important, that kind of partnership. And what I wanted to add is that teachers are very interested. We always invite them because they're the most important person in a child's life after the parent. So they sometimes they don't meet the parent only twice a year, maybe, for the scorecard. So we bring them together, we analyze the situation of the child, and now we are even thinking of using the neuropsychologists to give training to occupational therapists in the school who are don't have very modern tools. So this is a very important stakeholder insofar as behavioral problems are concerned, learning disabilities, and so on and so forth. We have to have the teacher as a partner. I think that social pediatrics has a role of influence. It is possible indirectly to act. Mrs. Mongeau mentioned that she had changed her teaching methods, and when we give a conference to other disciplines, we try to influence them also. And as the young resident said, students should also ask for a change. So change has to come from students also. I tried to maybe make a distinction or a nuance, but you can learn the content of social pediatrics, but for example, in theater, music, you don't need to know how to play the instrument. So what's at the heart of social pediatrics is to understand the different interactions, to know how to resort to the different disciplines. So for example, when Dr. Julien is in a clinic, he looks at a child, he thinks, okay, if maybe it would be good for that child to do dance, to take dance lesson or soccer, to play soccer. So that is what is important, in fact. It's the interaction between the different components that create social pediatrics. Thank you very much. Nicole Pelot, pediatrician from Switzerland. Two things. First, from my experience, teachers, nurses really support me. It is true, it's very important. Insofar as everybody's education in terms of what's to be done for children, there are two questions. First, the definition of social pediatrics. There's one in Europe, one in Germany, one for Dr. Julien. There are target populations that are different and also approaches. But apart from that, my question is this, because I'm also interested in how to teach social pediatrics in Switzerland. But the question is this: is there is there a platform at the international level place to really promote social pediatrics and to present our arguments in favor of social pediatrics?
We have the ESOP, of course, which is quite active organization still after 35 years. And we meet every now and then, and we have every year, and we have activities, and we have statements about what is public health, what is the idea of public health, and things like that. And we have exchange between members, and so you're well aware of that, of course. And we have tried within ESOP also to promote, together with the World Health Organization and with associations of schools of public health, to have some European courses. We started, some of them have been run we have some in Sweden, we have others in Spain and so on. But at the moment, there are pediatric courses for Europe in Dubrovnik, for instance, every summer. There are other courses, but we don't have a common educational system. Partly because social pediatry is different in different countries, but also because we haven't been able to put together the resources, and we haven't got the support from European Union to do that. But we're still working on it, and the present leadership of ESOP is quite active in finding means to develop a common training activities in social pediatrics and child health.
J'ai vu aussi dans mes lectures
I also saw in the readings that I had the Institute of Medical Ethics, and that's in England. The Institute of Medical Ethics, IME,
of covering how medical ethics and law should be taught, learned, and assessed. Since 1996, IME has used a consultation process to build consensus, resulting in the first consensus statement on the core ethics and law curriculum in 1998, updated in 2010. So maybe, you could be closer to me in accessing information from IME.
Oui.
Well, thank you. Something that was said earlier, what we want is that medical students and residents, where they are studying, they should be immersed in their own community. And it's not if you send them to England or Dubrovnik. I want this to take place in my city, in my neighborhood, in my area. So we need some argument, because you have, to really involve people in the city itself. Since I have known Dr. Köhler, I, hear about child help. He's always defended, even within ESOP. There were many questions about the title. There was ESOP or ISOP, but child help. That's what Dr. Köhler was underlining many times. And we're going to work also in Florida with Jeff, and we've spoken with Sue as well. Child health equity. And what I'm trying to find actually right now is a mobilizing concept when you can have different definition of social pediatrics. We all have very good definitions. We do not pretend to have the definition of social pediatrics, and it's evolving all the time anyway. But we have, at international level, we have to find a common denominator, which is child help. We are all involved in child health and help, and with an equity which is based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And that's where we really can gather. I don't think there is no one within ESOP or elsewhere in social pediatrics that will not agree with this notion, and we should integrate all those who work in the field of child health, including the volunteers. But we try to concentrate on a particular niche, which is equity and the children's right. And maybe we could, at that level, find some international consensus, and we could enter our data, and people will use them to work in their respective countries or neighborhoods. And we speak about vulnerable communities or communities as such, and to get them out of the universities and the big centers. This is a proposition. I don't know what Leonard think about that, but he said it should be called child help. Thank the people also in the room. For a moderator, there is nothing better than being authentic and then hearing your comments. And I think from both sides, you really participated. So I've learned quite a great deal. Thank you to all of you. I think that here it is.
Je vais vous dire ma grande satisfaction.
I would like to say how satisfied I feel for this symposium. It took a lot of time for us to organize it, but at the same time it was relatively easy. All the people we invited said yes, very gracefully. And that's quite remarkable. And Jean-François Lépine in particular was really embarked upon the process from the outset, and he offered his contribution, exceptional contribution indeed. Yes, we can give him a hand, definitely. And this is the strength of social pediatrics, is the involvement and participation of people from all kinds of sectors. When their commitment is really for us very encouraging. We are surrounded by extraordinary people, and you're part of them. Because all the remarks I've had is, well, what energy, how interesting, exciting possibility to network. We don't see this every day. So I think for people who come from outside can really appreciate that. In conferences, it's very rare that this type of what I would call, an explosion of relationship, of exchange takes place. And we have experienced very beautiful examples of that over the last 2 days. And that also encourages us to continue. We probably will have an international symposium in 2 years from now, maybe in Quebec City, just to, change a little bit. But we needed 2 years to hold such a symposium that would be more and more international. And maybe we could speak about child help and equity. That might be the next topic for the next symposium. And that would give us some time to prepare it. So thank you for your presence. And I would like to come back to the Aboriginal elder. She said, put your spirits together and communicate socially, but also spiritually. I think we did that. And this intensity of exchanges that we've had, of sharing, I think that has, by the way, stimulated our brain. I think all the neuropsychologists and neuroscientists will agree there is a lot of, motivation. And since there is no age to multiply neural cells, well, we all benefited from that. But at one point they start decreasing, so we have to activate them on a regular basis. So I'd like to invite you to maybe remain in what I would call some kind of spiritual contact with each other. This is the way to move forward, to progress, and to remain creative when we share our respective intelligence. Thank you. We have some small token of appreciation, and thank you for being here, and thank you for going back and continue to help develop social pediatrics.